A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support.
It was a night like any other when my world began to unravel. I remember sitting on my bed, the faint glow of my fairy lights flickering against the walls of my small studio apartment. It was supposed to feel cozy, the kind of sanctuary where I could escape the chaos of life. But that night, the laughter I'd shared with friends earlier faded into a haunting silence, and my phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. His name was Alex. We had been together for 2 years, and I thought I knew him inside and out. He was charming, with that effortless smile that could light up a room and a way of making me feel like I was the only person that mattered in the universe. I fell for him hard, lost in the whirlwind of young love and late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. But beneath that charming facade, something much darker lurked, hidden away like a secret I was too naive to see. Our relationship had started off like a dream: dinner dates, spontaneous road trips, and quiet evenings cuddled up on the couch. But as the months rolled by, little things began to change. The late-night texts, the sudden need for space, and the way he'd look at his phone, eyes darting away whenever I walked into the room. It was as if I was watching a slow-motion train wreck, powerless to stop it. I dismissed my instincts, brushing them off as paranoia or insecurities. But the night I received that message, everything came crashing down. It was from a number I didn't recognize, and the words carved through me like a knife. "You deserve to know, he's been seeing someone else. And I think you should get tested." My heart raced, disbelief morphing into a painful knot in my stomach. As if that wasn't enough, the weight of the additional revelation crushed me: an STD. The words echoed in my mind, words that felt like they were written in blood. An infection. A betrayal that went beyond anything I could have imagined. In that moment, the comfort of my little sanctuary felt suffocating. I tossed the phone aside and buried my face in my hands, tears streaming down my cheeks. Anger coursed through my veins like fire, mingled with an intense sense of betrayal. How could he? After everything we shared, how could he do this to me? I felt the dizzying spiral of heartbreak, betrayal, and rage culminating in one searing truth: I needed to take back control. And so, I made a promise to myself that night, a promise to reclaim my power, to ensure that no one else would have to endure the pain I felt. I was done being a victim, and I was ready to make him pay for every lie, every hidden moment, and every ounce of trust he shattered. This is my story. A tale of heartbreak and discovery, but also one of cunning revenge. Truth be told, when the dust finally settles, you're about to learn that sometimes the most powerful weapon you can wield is the truth itself. The next few days passed in a haze, a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't control. I remember lying awake through the early hours, heart racing while replaying every memory I had of Alex, dissecting them like a forensic analyst trying to find clues to a crime he hadn't seen coming. I felt sick thinking about the intimate moments we shared, the laughter, the late-night confessions, the promises made under the starlit sky. All those memories felt tainted now, poisoned by his betrayal. I was spiraling. The image of him with someone else, laughing and kissing her. Did he kiss her the way he kissed me? Did he whisper sweet nothings in her ear, just like he used to do with me? The jealousy clawed at my insides, tearing through the pain like a vengeful beast. But it wasn't just jealousy, it was the crushing weight of humiliation. I felt like an absolute fool, a marionette dancing on strings he'd yanked with careless abandon. After a long, sleepless night, I finally mustered the courage to see a doctor. The sterile smell of the clinic was a stark contrast to the chaos roiling in my mind, and when the nurse handed me the results, I felt like the world had stopped spinning. There it was, a diagnosis that would forever change the way I viewed intimacy, the way I viewed trust. I felt like I was holding a ticking time bomb. The bomb was my heart, and the countdown to my revenge had officially begun. It was time to confront him. I set a plan in motion, fueled by righteous anger and a burning desire for revenge. I texted Alex, craftily crafting my words to sound casual. "Hey, can we talk? There's something important I need to discuss." When he replied almost immediately, giddy and eager, it was like a switch flipped inside me. I was no longer that vulnerable girl who had given her heart to him. The vulnerability was replaced by a cold, steely resolve. He suggested we meet at our favorite cafe, and I could already picture the look on his face when everything unraveled. The thought of the confrontation sent a thrill through me, the sweet taste of poetic justice. As I sat at the cafe, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee, I rehearsed what I wanted to say. The people around me were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing inside, but I was center stage in my own personal play, and I was ready for my monologue. Finally, the door swung open, and there he was, bright-eyed and unaware. It took everything within me not to smile at his unsuspecting demeanor. "Hey!" he beamed, sliding into the seat across from me. "You look different. Everything okay?" That innocent concern almost made my blood boil. "Everything's just peachy, Alex," I said, barely hiding the sarcasm that dripped from my words. "In fact, I just got back from the doctor." His brow furrowed in confusion as I watched the color drain from his face when I revealed the truth. "What do you mean?" he stuttered, a mixture of shock and panic flashing in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" I leaned forward, relishing the moment. "You know exactly what I mean. I got a message from someone who knows you better than I did. They told me to get tested, and guess what I found out?" The reality of what I was saying hit him like a freight train. I relished the way his confident demeanor crumbled before me like a house of cards. "You're being dramatic," he finally muttered, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his efforts to maintain composure. The facade was slipping, and I didn't need his admission to know I had him cornered. "I'm being dramatic?" I echoed, my tone low and dangerous. "You think this is a joke? Do you even realize the implications of what you've done? You gave me an STD, Alex. You cheated on me. You shattered the trust I had in you, in us." His jaw clenched, and the color drained from his face. "I didn't mean to hurt you," he mumbled, but the feeble apology rang hollow. It was too late for remorse, it fell flat against the weight of my anger. "Didn't mean to hurt me?" I couldn't help but laugh, a sharp, bitter sound that seemed to echo in the otherwise cozy cafe. "You think that excuses everything? You think you can just sweep your betrayals under the rug because you didn't plan it out? You're a coward, Alex." I watched as he squirmed under my gaze, his charm dissolving into a clumsy attempt at damage control. He reached for my hand, but I recoiled as if he had burned me. "Just hear me out." I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted. I was scared. "Scared?" I shot back, incredulous. "You were scared of what? Commitment? Honesty? Because if being in a relationship scared you, you should have had the decency to talk to me about it instead of running off into someone else's arms." The surrounding patrons began to look over, glancing at our escalating confrontation. I relished the moment, the spotlight shining on us, and I leaned into it. "Did she make you feel like a man, Alex? Did she make you feel wanted? Because I bet she didn't have the faintest idea that you were still with me." His expression transformed from panic to defensiveness. "You don't know her. You're making this about her when it's about us." That was the moment I snapped. "It's about you, Alex. It's always been about you." I leaned back, crossing my arms defiantly. "But this isn't just about our relationship anymore. I'm not just some girl you can play with, I'm done being your emotional punching bag." The realization that he'd lost control began to set in. I could see it in his eyes, the realization that I had turned the tables on him, that I was no longer that heartbroken girl who'd cried herself to sleep, hoping he'd change. "You think you can just walk away from this?" I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You think you can just pretend this never happened? I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you are." As his eyes widened in shock and fear, I felt a rush of exhilaration. The thought of exposing him, of revealing the truth to anyone who would listen, filled me with a sense of power I hadn't anticipated. Wouldn't it be poetic to bring him to his knees, to lay bare every lie he fed me? "Please, don't," he stammered, desperation seeping into his voice. "I'll do anything. Just don't tell anyone." The irony wasn't lost on me. He was pleading for mercy after the chaos he'd unleashed in my life. "That's the thing, Alex. You can't ask for mercy when you've shown none. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to reclaim my life and expose your truth. You took advantage of my trust, and now it's your turn to face the consequences." I leaned in closer, locking eyes with him, savoring the raw emotion that flickered across his face: confusion, guilt, fear. It was a heady mix, intoxicating in a way I had never experienced before. Suddenly, I felt liberated, like I had shed the weight of his betrayal, leaving behind my old self who allowed love to blind her to reality. In that instant, I knew that my revenge didn't just mean telling a few friends or posting on social media. No, I wanted to ensure this lesson lingered with him. I wanted him to feel the humiliation that had wrapped around me like a suffocating shroud. He needed to know that actions had consequences, and I was ready to be the one to make him pay for the trauma he inflicted on me. How does it feel to know that someone out there is waiting to expose you? To see you squirm? To know that the woman you thought was just a fling could very well turn the world against you? I challenged, enjoying the way he recoiled as my words dug deeper. He shook his head, desperate, like a cornered animal. "You're being cruel. I didn't want to hurt you." His voice was shaky, a faint echo of the man I once loved. "Cruel?" I laughed again, this time without any hint of amusement. "Cruel is betraying someone who loved you unconditionally. Cruel is letting your selfish desires dictate your actions without a second thought for how it impacts the people in your life. I'm merely giving you a taste of your own medicine." The cafe was buzzing around us, patrons now fully engrossed in our confrontation. I could feel the intensity of their stares, the whispers and side glances that wrapped around us like a cocoon. In that moment, I wasn't just seeking revenge, I was reclaiming my identity, reminding myself that I was worth more than the hurt he had tried to inflict. "I'm going to tell your friends," I continued, my voice steady and unwavering. "I'll let them know how you've been playing them, how you've been lying about your relationships, keeping secrets like a child hiding their candy. I'll make sure your reputation is forever tainted, and there's nothing you can do about it." The look of horror etched on his face was worth every moment of pain I had endured. It was the turning point I had been waiting for, the moment I realized that the power belonged to me now. "I'm not afraid of what you'll do," he blurted out, trying to regain some semblance of control, but I could see the cracks in his bravado. "You wouldn't really hurt me like that." I smirked, leaning back, letting the silence linger. "Oh, but I will, Alex. You don't know me anymore. You only think you do." And as I sat there, watching the reality of what he had done settle over him in waves, I felt a surge of triumph. There was no going back now. The narrative had shifted. What was once a story of betrayal had transformed into one of empowerment. I stood up, ready to leave him squirming in that cafe, surrounded by onlookers who'd just witnessed a broken relationship unravel in real time. "Enjoy the rest of your day, Alex," I said, turning to walk with each step away from the cafe. The adrenaline coursed through me, fueled by a mix of triumph and determination. The confrontation was just the beginning. My revenge plan began to take shape in the back of my mind, each detail carefully orchestrated to ensure Alex realized the full weight of his choices. First and foremost, I needed to collect evidence, solid proof of his deceit. I texted the anonymous tipster who had initially reached out to me. "Thank you for telling me about Alex. Can you share more details? I need to know everything." It didn't take long for them to respond, dropping cryptic hints about other girls he'd been seeing, including one who was definitely serious and seemed to know about me. This was just what I needed. If I could gather more names and stories, I could build a case that would leave him exposed for everyone he cared about. Next, I reached out to my own circle of friends. I made a group chat where I could share everything. I carefully crafted my words. "Hey everyone, I need to talk. Alex and I recently broke up under shocking circumstances, and it's important that you know the truth. I would love your support." I scheduled a gathering where I could tell them the story in person. I knew that by revealing his betrayal to my friends, I could create an echo of my story that would eventually reach all the people in his life. The goal was to ensure they saw him for who he really was, deceptive and unworthy of trust. For the grand finale, I knew social media would be my stage. I created an anonymous account on a platform where he was quite active, using a name he wouldn't recognize. One night, I meticulously composed a post that would send shockwaves through his friends. "Attention, if you're dating Alex, you might want to get tested." After 2 years of being blindsided by his lies, I learned he's been seeing multiple girls behind my back and that he gave me an STD. Don't let his charm fool you. this guy is playing a dangerous game. I included screenshots of our conversations, the texts from my anonymous tipster, and even snippets of messages showing his flirtation with other women. It was a calculated move, but I felt confident that the truth needed to be known, and I would make sure it spread like wildfire. As the days passed, I could almost feel the tension mounting around us. I had set everything in motion, and it was a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. I knew the fallout would be monumental. I stashed away my phone in a drawer and chose to engage in self-care, focusing on myself, my health, my hobbies, and my friends. I had to remind myself that this plan was about reclaiming my power and not getting lost in the chaos. The day finally arrived when I was prepared to unleash my plan. I woke up early, giddy with anticipation. I donned my favorite outfit, the one I knew made me feel confident and fierce. The time had come to confront Alex once more, but this time, it would be on my terms. I arranged to meet him at the same cafe, but instead of sitting across from him, I planned to stand at a distance, watching him squirm as he interacted with friends and acquaintances. I wanted to see the moment the post went live, the moment he'd realize everything was crashing down around him. As I entered the cafe, the familiar scent of roasted coffee and pastries wafted through the air, but it felt tainted now, a reminder of the good times that had been irrevocably lost. I spotted him at a corner table, surrounded by a group of mutual friends, laughing and sipping on his usual caramel macchiato. He looked effortlessly charming, yet it struck me how truly superficial that charm was. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was about to unfold. My heart raced as I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling slightly. I opened the anonymous account and hit post. A surge of exhilaration washed over me as I pressed the button, watching the words fly into the digital ether. The caption read, "Attention, if you're dating Alex, you might want to get tested." After 2 years of being blindsided by his lies, I learned he's been seeing multiple girls behind my back and that he gave me an STD. Don't let his charm fool you, this guy is playing a dangerous game. As the notification flashed across the screen, I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was like standing on the precipice of a roller coaster, waiting for the drop. I quickly tucked my phone away, but the anticipation was electric. Within moments, my instincts proved right. The post started to gain traction, likes, shares, and comments flooding in. I watched as Alex's laughter faltered, his face flashing confusion as he glanced at his phone. I could see the moment his smile faded, replaced by panic as he scrolled through the comments. Friends leaned in closer, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock. "What the hell is this?" I heard him mutter, his voice barely above a whisper. My heart raced, I felt an intoxicating mixture of fear and excitement at the chaos I had unleashed. I watched as his fingers flew over his screen, trying to respond, to dial me, but it was too late. Each passing second felt like an infinite cascade of poetic justice. "Alex, what's wrong?" one of his friends asked, concern etched across her face. "That's not true," he snapped, his voice rising, drawing even more attention. "It's just some bullshit rumor." But I could see the cracks in his facade, deepening, the way his eyes darted around the cafe, searching for allies, for someone to defend him. I reveled in the realization that he was utterly alone, surrounded by friends who were now questioning everything they thought they knew about him. The cafe began to fill with whispers, the air thick with disbelief and judgment. I overheard snippets of conversation around me, people speculating about his character, about the girl he cheated on me with, and the devastating implications of his betrayal. The power I felt was palpable. Alex was being publicly dismantled before everyone's eyes. "Who is she?" another friend asked, her brow furrowing in concern. "Is this true?" "I don't know who it is. It's a lie," he shouted, his desperation growing more apparent. But beneath his panicked attempts to dismiss the truth, I could see the cracks of his confidence widening. I dared a glance at his face, and it was ghostly pale, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. My heart raced with satisfaction. This was the poetic justice I envisioned. Unable to contain myself any longer, I walked closer, feigning nonchalance. But inside, I was a storm. "Hey Alex," I said, my voice cool and steady, slicing through the tension like a knife. The aftermath of that day was a whirlwind of emotions that left me feeling both exhilarated and deeply reflective. I had orchestrated the perfect storm, unveiling the facade Alex had maintained for far too long. The repercussions of my actions rippled through both our lives in ways I hadn't anticipated. As the days turned into weeks, I watched the fallout unfold. Alex's social media accounts were flooded with comments, friends expressing disbelief, others demanding answers. I knew the truth would eventually settle within his circle, but I wasn't prepared for how it would echo throughout our entire community. Word spread fast. Mutual acquaintances approached me with pity in their eyes and disbelief in their voices. "Is it true?" they would ask, their tone heavy with concern. I realized that the wound I had inflicted on Alex was not just physical, it was a public humiliation that would follow him, haunting every interaction he had for months to come. I braced myself for the whispers, the questions swirling around me. Did he really do that? Can you believe it? I even received messages from others who had been in similar situations, thanking me for speaking out. They felt emboldened by my confrontation, empowered to share their own stories of betrayal. I was inadvertently leading a movement of sorts, one that demanded accountability from those who played with hearts and trust. Meanwhile, Alex struggled to regain some semblance of control in his life. I'd see him occasionally, often attempting to maintain a brave face, but the shadows under his eyes told another story. The confidence he once radiated had vanished, replaced by an unease that made him seem foreign to me. Gone was the charming boy who swept me off my feet. In his place stood a man hollowed out by the consequences of his actions. Yet, amidst the triumph of my revenge, I grappled with conflicting emotions. Each time I watched Alex try to laugh off the rumors or explain himself to bewildered friends, the initial thrill of vengeance ebbed away, replaced by a pang of guilt. I had wanted him to feel the sting of betrayal, but did he truly deserve this endless cycle of shame? I found myself reflecting on my own humanity. Did I want to be the person who reveled in someone else's destruction? Was my thirst for revenge worth the toll it took on my conscience? As I navigated these uncomfortable thoughts, I began to understand that vengeance is not a simple concept, it's riddled with complexity and nuance. In the midst of this turmoil, I turned inward, using my experience as a catalyst for personal growth. I sought therapy, determined to unpack the layers of my heartbreak and the anger that had driven my revenge. My therapist encouraged me to view my experience as a journey of self-discovery rather than just a chapter marred by betrayal. I found strength in vulnerability, learning to embrace my emotions, anger, sadness, and ultimately, forgiveness. The process was arduous, but with each session, I chipped away at the bitterness that had taken root in my heart. Slowly, I began to forge a new identity, one not defined by Alex's betrayal but by my resilience in the face of it. Weeks later, after the dust had settled, I encountered Alex again at a mutual friends gathering. The air was thick with tension as our eyes met across the room. I could see the hesitation in his gaze, a mixture of remorse and defiance. As I approached him, my heart raced, but this time, it was for a different reason.
It's funny how seemingly small annoyances can pile up into a towering mountain of resentment. I never wanted to become that person, the bitter neighbor who nurses grudges like a pet. But here we are. I can still picture the moment it all began, that fateful evening when Lucas, my charming but infuriating neighbor, decided that my driveway was his personal parking lot. It was one of those scorching summer days when the sun seemed to hang heavy in the sky, baking our suburban neighborhood into a sleepy haze. I could smell the grass being freshly mowed, its sharp, earthy scent mingling with the sweet aroma of my homemade lemonade. I had just stepped out onto my porch, ready to unwind with a good book, when I spotted Lucas's sleek black sedan blocking my way again. The absurdity of it made my blood boil. He had already played this game too many times. Lucas is that kind of guy, the one who flashes a disarming smile and has a way of making even the most mundane conversation feel like a special encounter. He's charming and handsome, with tousled hair that catches the light just right, making it hard to dislike him. But underneath that easygoing demeanor lurks a selfishness that grates on my last nerve. I could hear him laughing with someone inside his car, his latest Tinder match, no doubt. The laughter floated like delicate bubbles through the air, infuriatingly carefree. I couldn't see her, but I pictured a young woman, wide-eyed and excited, her heart fluttering at the prospect of a perfect first date. Meanwhile, here I stood, my plans for a peaceful evening shattered by his thoughtlessness. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow over my neighborhood, a stark contrast to the darkening storm brewing within me. I felt the familiar fire of anger ignite, hot and unyielding, as I paced in front of the blockade that had become a familiar fixture in my life. It's funny, really, how something as trivial as a blocked driveway could turn into a festering wound, one that I had tried to ignore for far too long. But tonight would be different. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh-cut grass somehow mixing with the smoldering ember of my simmering rage. This was the moment when the scales tipped. I could feel it in my bones. Tonight, I would take action. Maybe it was the heat, or perhaps the weight of all those unresolved frustrations that pushed me over the edge, but one thought echoed in my mind with relentless clarity. He had made a choice, one too many times, and now it was my turn to remind him that his actions had consequences. As I slipped my phone from my pocket, a chill ran down my spine, an omen of what was to come. Little did I know, this would become a twisted tale that would forever change the dynamic of our little cul-de-sac. A date might have been on the line, but revenge was not far behind. As I stood there, my heart pounding in my chest, I tried to talk myself down. Maybe it's not that big of a deal, I thought. People make mistakes. But deep down, I knew this was far from a simple mistake. This was a pattern, an ongoing narrative of disrespect. Lucas didn't just block my driveway, he dismissed my space, my time, my very existence. Each time he parked in front of my house, it felt like a symbolic declaration, your needs don't matter. I clenched my fists, feeling the tension in my muscles as I imagined how many times I'd allowed his selfishness to slide by. The first time he parked there, I shrugged it off, I didn't want to rock the boat. I chalked it up to him having a rough day. The second time, I knocked on his door, and he smiled, apologizing profusely, stating it wouldn't happen again. I wanted to believe him. But the third, fourth, and fifth times, the pattern became painfully clear. Each apology was as empty as the promises he made. And now, as I watched him through his tinted windows, chuckling with his date, I felt a wave of betrayal wash over me. I had seen my own reflection in his casual disregard, and it sickened me. How can he laugh while I'm stuck here fuming? I thought. My mind raced back to my own attempts at connecting with others, how I had once tried a dating app, only to be ghosted or treated like an afterthought. This was a man who could effortlessly charm anyone, all while treating me like a doormat. Is this really the kind of neighbor I want to be? I grappled with the question, a gnawing sense of sadness creeping in. I had preferred to be the calm, understanding neighbor, but he had turned me into a simmering cauldron of resentment. Each laugh I heard from his car felt like a personal slap in the face. The more I thought about it, the more I began to view our interactions as a twisted game, a game I had been losing. The sadness morphed into a searing anger, filling my veins like molten lava. It was no longer just about a blocked driveway, it was about reclaiming my dignity. Why should I let him have the upper hand? I thought, even as a part of me wanted to resist this dark urge. I could feel the urge for revenge crawling up my spine, a whispering seduction. It was intoxicating, powerful, a way to wrestle back control over my own life. Just one more time, I told myself, staring at the sleek black car, an extension of his entitlement. One more time, and he'll understand the consequences of his actions. I felt a wicked thrill at the thought, an idea that had been festering under the surface for far too long. The image of him stepping out of his date and discovering his car absent sent a shiver of excitement through me. Was I really going to do this? A part of me tried to step back, to reason with the voice that whispered sweetly of revenge, but the anger had taken root. I imagined Lucas's face, a mixture of confusion and disbelief, replaced by embarrassment as he scoured the streets for his beloved sedan. It was petty, yes, but it felt justified, an equalizer in a world that seemed eager to trivialize my needs. My heart raced as I scrolled through the contacts on my phone, searching for the number of the towing company I had used in the past. I could almost hear the gears of fate grinding as the weight of my decision sank in. The phone felt heavy in my hand, each digit a step deeper into this dark rabbit hole I was willingly plunging into. As I dialed the number, a giddy mix of adrenaline and dread coursed through me. "Hi there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady as the operator answered. "I need to report a vehicle blocking my driveway." Each word felt like a confession, a step further away from the person I thought I was. I provided the details: Lucas's car, the make and model, the location, and with every minute I spent on the call, I felt my resolve hardening. I was finally taking control. But just as my heart began to swell with a morbid sense of satisfaction, it all came crashing down. The operator informed me that they would dispatch a tow truck immediately. I hung up, my hands shaking slightly as I turned to stare at Lucas's car once more. The laughter inside the vehicle had risen, filling the warm evening air with an almost mocking tone. I could almost envision his date, her laughter washing away any worries she might have had, unaware of the storm brewing just a few feet away. What if they came outside and I was caught? The thought sent an icy wave of apprehension through me. I tried to shake it off, to reassure myself that it was too late to back down now. But as I stood there, a witness to their carefree banter, the joy I had briefly felt about my petty vendetta began to dissolve into something darker. Suddenly, I was struck by an overwhelming wave of humiliating doubt. I had grown up striving to be better than the people who let their tempers dictate their actions, those who reveled in drama and chaos. Had I really lowered myself to this level? I fought back against the inner voice that scolded me, but the tension was building, like a pressure cooker ready to blow. Minutes passed like hours as I waited, a prisoner to my own impulses. I paced back and forth, nerves fraying at the edges. The laughter inside the car had dulled to a soft murmur, punctuated by the occasional burst of excitement from his date. With each passing moment, I felt more isolated, trapped in my own feelings of resentment and regret. How did it come to this? Then, the unmistakable sound of a tow truck rumbling down the street sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I held my breath, watching as the truck pulled up in front of my house. The driver emerged, a burly man with tattoos sprawling down his arms, his demeanor all business. In that moment, I could hardly believe it was happening. My heart raced, a symphony of fear and exhilaration as I realized that there was no going back now. As the driver approached the parked car, I felt a sickening mix of anticipation and dread. What would Lucas say when he finally noticed? Would he accuse me? Would his date laugh, or would she be horrified? I peered through the darkened windows of his car, straining to see their reaction. Would they hear the commotion outside? And then, in an abrupt moment of cosmic irony, I witnessed the complete unraveling of the evening. Lucas's date opened the door to step outside, mischief glinting in her eye as she said something teasing that made him chuckle. But as soon as they both glanced toward the street, their laughter fell away. Lucas's expression morphed from delight to confusion and horror, his jovial demeanor evaporating like dew in the morning sun. In that second, as the realization washed over his face, I felt an intoxicating surge of power. It was a feeling I hadn't anticipated, a rush that sent a shiver down my spine. I hadn't just redirected my frustration, I had taken the reins of my narrative and spun it into something undeniably satisfying. Lucas's laughter faltered, his smile fading as he stepped forward, the casual confidence he wore like a mantle slipping away. I could see the moment he registered what was happening. His eyes widened, darting from the tow truck to his beloved black sedan, and the mirth that once danced across his features was replaced by confusion and disbelief. It was beautiful, an unfiltered reflection of the chaos I'd spent months curating, and I stood frozen, a spectator to my own masterpiece. "Wait, what?" he began, his voice rising, frantic. His date, a striking blonde with sparkling eyes, followed his gaze, a mix of confusion and concern crinkling her brow. I was captivated by the dynamic, a perfect embodiment of my earlier insecurities. His charm, his easy laughter, all of it had built up a facade, and now it was cracking in real time. The driver of the tow truck approached Lucas with an air of nonchalance, clipboard in hand, as if they were simply discussing the weather instead of about to haul away his prized possession. "You can't park here, buddy. Blocking someone's driveway is a big no-no," he stated matter-of-factly, his voice gruff but not unkind. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with implications, and I felt a savage thrill at the sight of my neighbor's veneer of confidence crumbling under the weight of his own arrogance. Lucas stammered, I didn't think, but his protest fell flat. The words felt empty, hollowed out by the reality that he had consistently ignored the needs of those around him, including mine. It was poetic in a way. He had built his world around the idea that he could do as he pleased, but now he was about to experience the consequences of his choices. I could hear the muffled laughter from inside the tow truck as the driver pointed to the sign at the end of my driveway, clearly stating the no parking rules. Each word felt like a hammer hitting a nail deeper into the coffin of Lucas's bravado. I wanted to scream with glee, to burst into applause at the poetic justice unfolding before me, but I knew I had to remain in the shadows, a silent puppeteer pulling the strings of this elaborate setup. Meanwhile, his date stood beside him, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she realized what was happening. "Lucas, is this your car?" She looked back and forth between him and the truck, bewildered. For a fleeting moment, I felt a flicker of guilt for her, but it was quickly extinguished by a wave of self-satisfaction. He deserved this, he had made his bed, and now he would have to lie in it. "I can't believe this," Lucas exclaimed, throwing his hands up in exasperation, a sharp edge in his voice that only served to escalate the situation. I could almost feel the heat radiating off his skin, the embarrassment mixing with indignation. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, and I couldn't tear my eyes away. My heart raced as I focused on their interaction, the emotional stakes rising higher with each passing moment. Lucas was no stranger to confrontation, but this was a reckoning he hadn't prepared for. His confidence was with adrenaline surging through my veins. I began to formulate what I believed would be a masterstroke in this game of neighborly revenge. I needed a plan that would not only serve as payback but also ensure that Lucas got the message loud and clear. Here's how I decided to execute my wickedly clever plot step by step. Before going all in on my revenge, I needed to assess the situation further. I knew that Lucas had a pretty routine lifestyle, but I needed to fine-tune the details. I made it a point to pay attention to his schedule over the next few days. When did he usually go on dates? What time did he leave for work? I even sat on my porch, feigning casual interest while taking note of when he parked and, more importantly, when he didn't. I worried he might catch on to my observations, but I convinced myself that being discreet would be easy. Just act natural, right? I learned Lucas typically had Tinder dates on Friday evenings, often just as the sun began to set. This was my window of opportunity. I decided to pick a particular Friday, one when I sensed he had a date scheduled. I made sure to confirm that the driveway was blocked. After all, that was the crux of my plan. Once I had a target date, I reached out to the towing company again, this time under the guise of a neighborly concern. "Hey, I noticed a vehicle has been frequently blocking the driveway right across from mine. I'd hate for something unfortunate to happen to it, you know. If it could be towed when it's blocking the drive, I'd be so thankful." I feigned innocence, ensuring they'd be available on that particular Friday evening. I was deeply entangled in this web of deceit, and the weight of the lie felt like a boulder on my chest. What if the towing company didn't come through? What if they got lost or decided to bail? I had to keep my cool and trust the plan. On the evening of the date, I needed to create the perfect diversion to ensure Lucas would park in his usual spot. I decided to host a barbecue on my front lawn, inviting a few of the neighbors over for some casual fun. I knew Lucas often had a habit of joining in whenever there was a gathering, thinking he could charm everyone with his stories. I scheduled everything to start around 6 p.m. I strategically set up the barbecue so that it would literally block his view of my driveway. The smoke, the laughter, the sounds of sizzling burgers, it would all be an alluring call to him, begging him to join in the fray and, more importantly, park his car right where I wanted him. I waited, heart racing, as my fellow neighbors mingled and enjoyed the food. Sure enough, it wasn't long before I spotted Lucas's car turning onto our street, just as I had predicted. My heart did a little dance of glee as he parked right in front of my driveway, unaware of the impending chaos about to unfold. At this point, I felt the familiar pang of doubt creeping in. What if things didn't go according to plan? What if he didn't block the driveway enough? I had to keep my composure, reminding myself that it was all coming together. Step 6, the moment arrived like a thunderclap. As Lucas stepped out of his sleek black sedan, he wore that same confident grin he used to charm everyone around him. But tonight, that smile would soon be stripped away, along with any dignity he clung to. My heart raced, pounding in syncopation with the simmering tension that hung thick in the humid evening air. He glanced towards my barbecue gathering, where laughter and chatter bounced like balloons, filling the air with an unmistakable sense of festivity. I could hardly hold back a smirk as I pretended to toss a burger on the grill, my eyes slyly watching him through the smoke. The scent of grilled meat mingled with the steady thrum of my pulse. It was intoxicating. His date emerged next, a vision of excitement as she twirled in her dress, her laughter ringing out like chimes. She was completely oblivious to the impending train wreck about to unfold. I could feel a sense of poetic justice sinking in, a perfect storm brewing right before my eyes. As Lucas approached, I caught the initial glimmer of confusion in his eyes as they landed on my driveway. The laughter faded into a controlled silence, replaced by the soft crackling of the barbecue. I could sense the shift in the air as he started to piece it together. Wait, is this? He turned back to his date, who looked just as puzzled, her eyebrows knitting together in concern. In that moment, dread washed over his features like ice water cascading down his spine. The laughter from the party around me felt like a cruel mockery of his unraveling confidence. My heart danced with glee. There was something so satisfying about his slow realization. He was trapped in his own self-inflicted dilemma. Just as he began to close the distance between us, the low rumble of the tow truck echoed down the street, a harbinger of chaos. I could see his eyes widen, pupils dilating as disbelief washed over him. He turned, seeking the source of the sound, and there it was, the very sign of his impending embarrassment trundling toward him. The driver of the tow truck hopped out, clipboard in hand, with a swagger that only added to the theatricality of the moment. "Sorry, buddy. This vehicle's blocking the driveway. Can't have that." His tone was devoid of sympathy, a perfect counterpoint to Lucas's disbelief. "No. Wait," shouted Lucas, his voice rising in desperation as he sprinted toward the truck. His charming veneer had shattered, and all that remained was a frantic man scrambling to salvage whatever he could. The panic in his voice sent a shiver of exhilaration through me. Finally, he was experiencing the chaos I had endured for far too long. With all due respect, the driver began, his brow furrowed as he gestured at the clearly posted no parking signs. "You can't park here, man. This driveway's off limits." The driver's face was a mask of indifference, and I could feel the thrill of justice course through me like a jolt of electricity. Lucas tried to explain, but his words were just an incoherent jumble of frustration and embarrassment. "I didn't, this is my car. I was just," but his voice had dwindled, overtaken by the roar of the engine and the mounting laughter echoing from my barbecue. Each ounce of amusement from my neighbors felt like a knife twisting into him, and it was glorious. His date stood frozen, mouth agape, unable to comprehend the scene unfurling before her eyes. I could almost see the thoughts racing. The chaos of Lucas's embarrassment reverberated through the evening air like a haunting melody, a satisfying echo of justice that rang true in my ears. As the tow truck driver maneuvered the vehicle onto the flatbed, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet twinge of remorse mixed with the elation of having taken control. Lucas's world was crumbling in front of me, the charade of charm and confidence he had built now reduced to a fragile facade. His date, who had seemed so thrilled moments earlier to be out with him, now stood in stunned silence, her excitement evaporating like vapor in the crisp night air. I caught the flicker of confusion in her eyes, her expression morphing from amusement to pity as she processed the scene unfolding before her. The reality of the situation was a stark contrast to the romantic narrative she'd likely envisioned for their evening. It was a cruel twist of fate, and for a brief moment, I felt a flash of compassion for her. But it was quickly overshadowed by the satisfaction of witnessing Lucas's public humiliation. As the truck drove away with his beloved black sedan in tow, Lucas turned back toward me, his expression shifting from anger to incredulity, a whirlwind of emotions flooding his features. "Did you do this?" he shouted, his voice a mix of rage and desperation. The words hung in the air, sharp and accusing, as my neighbors all turned to look at the unfolding drama, their eyes wide with a mix of shock and intrigue. "I don't know what you're talking about, Lucas," I replied, feigning innocence, the corners of my mouth twitching into a barely contained smile. "Maybe if you hadn't blocked my driveway, this wouldn't have happened." The satisfaction of delivering that line washed over me like a soothing balm, a damning reminder of the many times he had dismissed my boundaries. The laughter of my neighbors mingled with Lucas's furious sputtering, creating a cacophony of joy that filled the night. It was a moment of poetic justice, a culmination of months of pent-up frustration released in a single instance of vulnerability. As his embarrassment painted his cheeks a fiery shade of crimson, I knew I had won this battle. But with each passing second, the thrill of my revenge began to dull, replaced by an unsettling pang of guilt. Watching Lucas's humiliation unfold had felt exhilarating, but the aftermath was far murkier. I had become the very person I had never intended to be, the villain in someone else's story. I had taken pleasure in his pain, and it hung over me like a dark cloud. In the days that followed, I witnessed the consequences of my actions reverberate through our small community. Lucas became a shell of his former self, a man stripped of the confidence that had once radiated from him like a beacon. He retreated into his home, offering only curt nods to those who dared to engage with him. The laughter that had once filled my evenings with warmth was replaced by an awkward tension, a silent acknowledgement of the incident that had become the talk of the neighborhood. As the weeks wore on, I caught glimpses of him through the curtains of his house, moments where he sat alone in the dim light, a distant figure framed by shadows. I felt a pang of guilt gnawing at me. The weight of my revenge settled heavily on my shoulders, a bitter reminder that the thrill I had chased was now a source of regret. I had wanted to teach him a lesson, but in the process, I had stripped him of the very essence that had made him human. The social consequences began to ripple outward like, you know that feeling when your gut twists in knots, and you can almost taste the bitterness lingering in your mouth? That's what it felt like every time I walked past my kitchen window, taking in the quiet suburb where I'd once felt safe. A neighborhood that had turned into the backdrop of the most painful chapter of my life. The sun would dip below the horizon, casting long shadows that fell like a shroud over my home, and with it came the memories, the sweet, syrupy ones that turned sour the moment I remembered the betrayal that had shattered it all. My name is Ella, and I've lived in this quaint little house for 5 years. It's the kind of place where neighbors wave as they walk their golden retrievers, and children ride bicycles giggling down the street. But what once felt like a sanctuary became a cage filled with echoes of laughter that no longer belonged to me. The key players in this story? Let's start with my husband, Mark. At first glance, he was everything I ever wanted, charming, ambitious, and with a smile that could light up the darkest room. But as I've learned, sometimes the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows. And then there was Lily, his best friend. She was the type of woman who could walk into a room and instantly draw everyone's attention. Her laughter was infectious, her beauty mesmerizing. I had once admired her, but now, she was the specter that haunted my dreams. It started innocently enough, the kind of mundane lies that slip through the cracks of a relationship. Late nights at work, casual mentions of meetings that never took place. But I was too blinded by love, or perhaps, too naive, to see the fissures growing beneath the surface. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a message on Mark's phone, a simple "can't wait to see you tonight," that the walls of my world began to tremble. In that moment, a chill ran down my spine, the kind that makes you want to turn away but keeps you locked in place, helpless and horrified. As I read those words, I felt them pierce me deeper than any knife ever could. My heart thudded loudly in my chest, drowning out the distant sounds of laughter from the street outside, sounds that felt like a cruel joke at my expense. That night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I could almost hear the whispers of my own despair mingling with the scent of betrayal that lingered in the air. The emotional turmoil churned in my stomach, rising like bile, and I realized then that I was no longer the victim in this twisted play of love and treachery. No, the time had come for me to serve a cold dish of revenge, one that would not only settle the score but perhaps lay waste to the very foundations of the lives they had built on lies. Something ominous loomed ahead, and I could feel it wrapping around me like a tight embrace, whispering that the storm was just beginning. And as I wrestled with the choices I had to make, a deep, simmering anticipation grew within me, turning that bitterness into something darker, something that demanded satisfaction. I was ready to reclaim my life, and they would not see it coming. The days that followed were a blur, each one stretching and contracting in a dance of disbelief and anger. My heart raced at the slightest thought of what I had discovered. The very air around me felt charged, heavy with unspoken words. For a while, I clung to the hope that I was misreading things, that Mark wouldn't dare betray me, yet, deep down, I knew the truth. It gnawed at me, pulling me under like a relentless tide. I wanted to confront him, to shake the truth out of him like a dog with a bone, but every time I opened my mouth, the words evaporated. Instead, I found myself slipping into a routine that felt foreign, a facade of normalcy that saw me laughing and smiling as if everything were all right. But inside, the turmoil was festering, growing like a cancer that threatened to overtake me. Every evening, I masked my fury while cooking dinner, the aromas wafting through my kitchen like some sickly sweet veneer over the bitterness eating away at my soul. Meanwhile, my mind would drift, twisting and turning through the memories of our life together. I could almost hear the echoes of us, laughing on the couch, sharing dreams under the stars, the promises that felt unbreakable. Each memory now felt like a knife, sharp and merciless, slicing through the fabric of my trust. Then came the day I crossed that line. It was a rainy Tuesday, with clouds heavy enough to burst at any moment. Mark was late coming home from work again, and I decided to take a drive to clear my head. As I pulled up to Lily's house, I thought of how often she had been in ours, laughing over dinner and sharing glasses of wine. I remember thinking she was family, someone I could rely on. The irony stung like a fresh wound. What I saw through the window of her living room turned my insides to ice. Mark, laughing, his face alive in a way I hadn't seen in months, and Lily, her fingers dancing along his arm like they were orchestrating a symphony of betrayal. It was an image seared into my mind, a grotesque painting of everything I held dear, splattered with treachery. In that moment, all the air was sucked from my lungs, and I felt swallowed by an overwhelming wave of grief and rage. I could feel the tears pooling in my eyes, blurring my vision, but I refused to let them fall. Instead, I embraced the anger, let it wash over me like a cleansing flame. How could he? I thought, each repetition of the phrase like a pulse in my temples. How could she? The betrayal wasn't just from him, it was from the woman I had considered a friend. They had built a world so seamless, so intricate, that it made my heart ache with a pain I had never known. As I drove home, the rain poured down, mirroring the chaos inside me. I stewed in my thoughts, retracing my steps, trying to piece together the moments that led up to this. The late nights that turned into excuses, the missed calls and secretive glances. I grappled with disbelief, anger, and that sinking sadness that comes from feeling utterly alone. And yet, amidst the turmoil, a seed of resolve began to sprout within me. The thought of confronting them felt like a trap, one where I would only serve as the pitiful victim. No, I would not let them see me cry. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing the full extent of the pain they had caused. Each moment I considered my next move, a new wave of humiliation crashed over me, forcing me deeper into isolation. The days turned into weeks, and my emotional state spiraled. I became a ghost in my own life, haunting the spaces I once filled with joy. Friends began to notice my absence. Invitations to gatherings trickled away, and the phone calls diminished. How could they understand the monstrous betrayal that was suffocating me? I felt like an imposter, masking my grief under a veneer of politeness, and the more I faked my joy, the more I isolated myself from everyone I cared about. One afternoon, I ran into my neighbor, Claire. She was sipping coffee on her porch, her golden retriever snoozing at her feet. She waved me over, concern etching her brow when I sat down. "Ella, you haven't been yourself lately. Is everything okay?" The question floated in the air, heavy and suffocating. I wanted to scream the truth but instead found myself nodding and muttering something about work stress. I could see the doubt flicker in her eyes, the urge to dig deeper. But I couldn't bear the idea of unearthing my pain so publicly. I forced a smile, but it felt like a mask slipping further down my face. And so, I continued to wear my disguise, but I could feel the weight of secrecy pressing down on me. One night, I decided to confront Mark about my suspicions, believing that maybe I could regain some semblance of my old life by demanding the truth. "Mark," I said, my voice trembling as I sat across from him at the dinner table, the tension thick enough to slice with a knife. "I found a message on your phone." I watched the way his expression shifted, the flicker of fear in his eyes. For a moment, I thought I might see guilt wash over him, but he quickly masked it with irritation. "It's nothing, Ella. Why can't you just trust me?" he snapped, his tone harsh and dismissive. I felt my heart sink. The arrogance in his voice made me feel small, belittled for my pain. Instead of owning up, he twisted the narrative, making me feel like the offender. I was left grappling with the revelation that he had turned my love into a weapon against me. "Do you really expect me to trust you after everything?" I shot back, my voice sharper than I intended. In that moment, I was no longer Ella, I was a stranger confronting the man I thought I knew. We argued for hours, and by the time we were done, I was left with a hollow silence and a raging storm of disbelief. Yet, the isolation seeped in, Mark's outrage had turned into contempt, and I felt utterly alone. No one could rescue me from his anger. It was another layer of betrayal that I hadn't anticipated. As days turned into dark nights, I stumbled upon more clues that drove the nail of despair even deeper. It was a Saturday when I discovered the last nail in the coffin, an offhand comment from one of Mark's colleagues at a barbecue I reluctantly attended. "Enjoying your new place with Lily?" he said, a playful grin plastered across his face. I froze. The laughter that followed felt like shards of glass cutting through my heart. I stood there, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks as humiliation flooded my senses. The world around me dulled, and I could hear my heartbeat thundering in my ears, drowning out the cheers and clinks of beer bottles. Suddenly, everyone was staring. I drove home that evening, the engine's growl drowning out the storm raging within me. Each bump in the road felt like the universe mocking my anguish as I replayed the words in my mind. "Enjoying your new place with Lily." It was as if I had been handed a blade, sharp and glinting, ready to cut my heart out and leave it for the crows. The anger simmered beneath my skin, igniting a fire I hadn't realized was there. Sitting in my driveway, I stared at the familiar side of my home, the sanctuary that had, unbeknownst to me, turned into a battleground. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles whitening as the reality of my situation slammed into me like a tidal wave. I was not merely a bystander in my own life, I was the fool. The final straw had been laid bare, stark and unbearable. Mark and Lily had twisted the knife deep enough to sever the bonds of our relationship, and as I sat there, that realization morphed into something potent, a mixture of rage and clarity. I had spent weeks wallowing in despair, hoping for something that no longer existed. A flicker of courage ignited within me. It was a whisper that told me I didn't have to be a victim anymore. As I stepped into the house, the air felt charged, thick with betrayal. My mind raced with thoughts of what I could do. I had always been the calm one, the one who believed in understanding and forgiveness. But now I was on the brink of embracing my darker side, the side that yearned for justice, however twisted it might be. I felt untethered, like a marionette with its strings cut, free to enact a plan that had been simmering beneath the surface. Ideas began to flood my mind, chaotic yet strangely comforting. My heart raced as I visualized the steps I could take, how I could orchestrate my revenge without them seeing it coming. What would be the perfect retribution for a betrayal of this magnitude? I replayed the moments of their laughter, their intimacy, and with every mental image, my resolve hardened. I thought of the weekends I spent organizing surprise parties for Mark, the countless hours I spent planning dinners for friends, a life I had built for them both. I had infused love into every corner of our home, every shared experience, every plan for the future. And now, it felt like every ounce of that love was a weapon I could wield against them. My fingers brushed the counter in the kitchen, where we had shared countless meals, where laughter had once filled the silence. I imagined it all collapsing, turning their joy into chaos, shattering the very foundation of the lives they had constructed on my heartbreak. But this wouldn't be mindless destruction. I wanted them to feel every ounce of despair that I felt. I wanted them to understand that betrayal comes at a cost, and I was more than willing to extract that price. My mind raced with ideas, the first tendrils of a meticulous plan weaving themselves together. The turning point wasn't just my discovery of their betrayal, nor was it the anger that boiled over after that barbecue. No, it was the moment when I realized I could take back my power. I could no longer be the passive participant in this tragic play. As I stood alone in my kitchen, the bittersweet taste of vengeance mingled with the remnants of my love, and for the first time in months, I felt alive. My heart was a storm, fierce and relentless, but it was a storm I would channel. I would know. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead settle over my shoulders like an old, familiar cloak. I was ready to meticulously craft my revenge, a dish served cold and with a side of poetic justice. I opened my laptop and began to outline my plan step by step, letting the adrenaline fuel my creativity. The first phase of my plan was all about information. I needed to know everything about their schedules, their routines, and who they confided in. That meant becoming the invisible observer in their lives. I knew Mark's phone was my best resource. I couldn't hack it, but I was adept at understanding his habits. So, I began with the basics, tracking his whereabouts on social media. I created a fake account on Instagram and started following Mark's friends, particularly those who routinely shared updates about their lives. I figured out their game nights, gym schedules, and everything else I needed to know to weave my way into their social fabric seamlessly. I reached out to Claire, my neighbor who had never suspected anything was amiss. I shared a fabricated story about needing help organizing a surprise birthday party for Mark. I framed it as an act of goodwill to help repair my relationship with him. Claire, being the sweet, unsuspecting soul she was eager to help and agreed to join forces. In her eagerness, she even suggested inviting Lily, thinking it would be a great way to mend fences among friends. I suppressed a smile at the irony, knowing this was going to be a crucial part of my plan. With Claire's help, I could draw them into a situation that would ultimately serve my purpose. I set the date for the party, and with Claire's assistance, I meticulously planned every detail. I chose a local venue that was beautiful yet intimate and emotional. Setting where whispers could float and laughter could mask deeper truths. The invites went out, and as guests began to accept, I felt a sense of control returning to my life. What I needed now was the perfect distraction for Mark and Lily. So, I crafted a series of side events, games that required teamwork, allowing them to rely on one another and further deepen the bond they had so callously torn from me. I could almost hear the whispers of betrayal echoing in the back of my mind, and each step closer to the big day felt like an electric charge pulsing through me. The pièce de résistance would be the cake, a stunning, multi-layered confection that would serve as a metaphor for my revenge. With my culinary skills honed over the years, I decided to bake the cake myself using a mix of flavors Mark loved. But the twist. Inside the cake, I would hide a small, tasteful message written on edible paper. As they cut the cake, it would reveal the truth about me discovering their affair, something that would catch them totally off guard. The message would read, "Happy birthday, Mark. Let's celebrate the lies you've built your life on." The night of the party arrived, and as I stood in the venue surrounded by friends and acquaintances, I could feel the simmer of excitement and anxiety in my stomach. Mark was oblivious, enjoying the attention like the narcissist he was, while Lily basked in the glow of her deception, unaware of the trap that was closing in around her. As the night unfolded, I orchestrated moments. The evening unfolded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Laughter echoed in the venue, mingling with the sweet scent of cake and the soft hum of chatter. It was a celebration, one that I had meticulously crafted, and yet, it felt like the calm before the storm. Mark beamed under the dim lights, completely oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lily, radiant as ever, flitted around the room like a butterfly, her laughter spilling like warm honey over the crowd. It sickened me. Every smile, every flirtatious quip they exchanged felt like daggers aimed at my heart. The cake stood at the center of the room, a glorious masterpiece draped in delicate icing. It was beautiful, and yet, I could feel the energy swirling around it, heavy, electric, pregnant with anticipation. I watched as the moments ticked by, my heart thumping in rhythm with the beat of my resentment. Finally, I clapped my hands, drawing everyone's attention. "All right, everyone. It's time for the big moment," I announced, my voice steady, though inside, I was trembling with a rush of adrenaline. Mark turned to me, his eyes alight with genuine excitement. "What do you have for me?" he asked, a childlike eagerness etched across his face. How could he be so blissfully ignorant? I gestured toward the cake, and cheers erupted from the crowd. Everyone gathered around, forming a semicircle as I moved to the side, a silent conductor guiding the symphony of my revenge. "Make a wish." I urged him, my eyes fixed on Lily, who stood to the side, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. There was something deliciously satisfying in watching her smile falter for just a second. Mark closed his eyes, and as he blew out the candles, I felt the tension knot tighter in my chest. He leaned forward, grasping the knife, and I held my breath, waiting for the moment the truth would slice through his delusion like a hot knife through butter. He cut into the cake, and a hush fell over the room. I could almost hear the collective intake of breath. As the first piece came free, the hidden note nestled within began to surface. My heart raced. I could see Mark's smile falter, confusion knitting his brows as the words gradually came into view. "What's this?" he asked, holding the piece in midair, the laughter from earlier dissipating into an uneasy silence. I watched as the crowd leaned in, curiosity etched into their expressions. The room felt electric, every face turned toward the revelation unfolding before them. In that moment, the edginess of the situation caught up with me. I felt exhilarated and terrified all at once, riding the razor's edge of vindication. Mark unfolded the note, his gaze darting between the paper and my face. "Ella, what is this?" His voice was barely above a whisper, a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. The room waited with bated breath, witnessing the unraveling of everything they believed to be true. "Happy birthday, Mark. Let's celebrate the lies you've built your life on." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, thick with betrayal. Gasps echoed around the gathering as realization dawned on the others, their eyes shifting from Mark to Lily. I watched as her face drained of color, the facade slipping away like a mask discarded. Mark looked up from the note, his eyes wide and uncomprehending. "What?" How did the silence that followed my revelation was deafening? In that moment, the room transformed into a stage of disbelief and betrayal, as each guest processed the sharp words that shattered the illusion Mark had built. I could see the weight of the situation settling on their shoulders, the fun and laughter replaced by a creeping unease. Mark's face morphed from confusion to anger in the blink of an eye. He looked at me, eyes blazing with fury, but it was the betrayal he felt, the realization that I had been one step ahead all along, that painted his expression with shades of panic. "You did this." His voice was an echo of the man I once loved, but now it felt foreign and cold, a remnant of the relationship that had died the moment he let Lily into our lives. The laughter from earlier felt like a distant memory, and in its place was the weight of truth, the kind that can only reveal itself through moments of stark clarity. Claire, who had been standing beside me, gasped, her eyes darting from Mark to me, then back again. "Ella, is this true? Did you know?" Her confusion was palpable. She had been my ally in this treacherous game, and her loyalty hung in the balance. "I knew," I responded, my voice steady even as my heart raced. I felt liberated, the shackles of shame and hurt falling away like dead leaves. And I wanted him to know that I'm not the fool he thought I was. The guests began to murmur amongst themselves, whispers spiraling through the crowd like a wildfire. The reality of the affair was settling in, and I could see the judgment in their eyes. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with condemnation, and I realized then that I had become a pariah in my own social circle. Yet, amid that realization, there was an undeniable sense of power coursing through me. Lily's facade crumbled as she grappled with the fallout, her confident demeanor replaced by panic. She tried to laugh it off, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. "It's not what you think, Ella. We were just what?" I interrupted, relishing the power that came from peeling back the layers of her lies. "Living in the shadows of my trust? Is that how you view our friendship? As an opportunity for betrayal?" Mark shot her a look of disbelief, and I could see the betrayal etched across his face. "You told me it was nothing," he spat, venom dripping from his words. The disgust in his voice was tangible, and I felt a twisted satisfaction at the unraveling of their bond. As the scene unfolded, I watched the room fracture. Friends who had once rallied around the couple looked on, some already shuffling away from the calamity that had erupted. The whispers grew louder, and the air thickened with tension as the reality set in. This betrayal wasn't just my story, it was theirs too. I stepped back, allowing the chaos to swell around me like a tempest. I felt a pang of guilt for the lives I was upending, Claire's confusion, the awkward glances from acquaintances I once called friends. But that guilt was eclipsed by the satisfaction of having regained control over my narrative. In the days that followed, the fallout continued like ripples in a pond. Mark and Lily were ostracized, their tight-knit circle unraveling in whispers of betrayal. The same friends who had once laughed with them now distanced themselves, finds themselves caught in the web of deceit they had spun. Invitations to gatherings dried up.